what just fell from the sky? He focused his eyes and realized with relief that it was only his own missile, but it was already too late to run. The powerful shockwave sent him flying tens of meters away. Anyone who's been hit by a missile knows that survival after such an explosion is nearly impossible, but Tony was no ordinary person. He was wearing his invincible bulletproof armor. While it protected one side of him, shrapnel still pierced through his body, and blood poured out uncontrollably. This marked the beginning of his nightmare. In a daze, he felt as if his insides were being stirred by someone, the excruciating pain causing him to scream in agony. But before he could do anything else, someone covered his mouth and nose, knocking him unconscious. When he woke up, he was in a state like this. A long, soft tube was inserted deep into his lungs. It took the woman quite a bit of effort to pull the tube out. Having been immobile for 3 days, her limbs were stiff, and when she tried to drink water, she couldn't quite reach the kettle. She didn't know whether the man in front of her was good or bad, so she carefully turned over, only to feel something tug at her. Tony turned around and saw a battery directly connected to his body. He quickly pulled back the bandages and found a round piece of metal deeply embedded in his chest. He had no idea what had happened to him, but one thing was for sure: his life was over. She asked him what the strange object on his chest was, but he just said, "Without it, you'd be dead already." It turned out that Tony's blood vessels were now filled with an electromagnetic device implanted in his chest. This device prevented the shrapnel from reaching his heart, but it also meant that he would need the battery to survive for the rest of his life. Even so, the war criminals who had captured him were still relentless, demanding that he build the Jericho missile for them. This missile, once launched, would split into numerous warheads, each capable of precise guidance, with power comparable to nuclear weapons. It could be said that it was Tony's greatest creation, but if it fell into the hands of these war criminals, the world would never know peace again. When Tony refused, they submerged him in water, trying to force him to comply through torture. He didn't know how many times they did this, but what was more terrifying than the physical torment was the psychological torture. The war criminals took him out of the cave and removed the hood from his head. The intense sunlight blinded Tony, but when he saw what lay ahead, he was stunned. The area outside was filled with weapons he had designed himself. Originally, he had created them to protect peace, but now they were being used as tools for world conquest. In that moment, his belief shattered, and he didn't know whether what he had done was right or wrong. But one thing was clear: no matter what, he couldn't let these bastards succeed. The leader ordered him to make use of local materials, promising that once the job was done, he would be set free. Tony seemed to agree on the surface, but deep down he knew that it didn't matter. His life was already at its end, so why should he leave a legacy? He started a hunger strike in protest. Ethan urged him to think about doing something for the world, rather than just dying. His words completely woke Tony up. Yes, even if he had to die, he would make them pay. The war criminals thought Tony had changed his mind, and no matter what he asked for, they did their best to fulfill his requests. Soon, Tony began his plan for revenge, starting with solving the mobility issue. For this, he dismantled the core components of the old version of the missile, which was worth millions. He didn't care about the missile itself. All he wanted was the metal plates inside. Each plate weighed 0.15 grams, and he needed 1.6 grams in total. This meant he would have to dismantle at least 11 missiles and then melt and shape these metal plates into rings the size of a bracelet. After precise welding, a super long-lasting electromagnet was ready. Despite being palm-sized, it could release 3 billion joules of energy per second, enough to keep Tony alive for 1,000 years. But Tony's ambition didn't stop there. He stacked the blueprints together and a humanoid robot design appeared in front of him. He was planning to create the first wearable exoskeleton. To keep things under wraps, the parts for the exoskeleton were made separately, and at first glance it seemed like he was still working on the missile. The war criminals monitoring him were suspicious, but they couldn't make sense of it and thought it was just an improvement on the missile design. That was until the day the leader finally realized something was off.